For decades, NASCAR presented itself as one of the most American institutions in professional sports. Blue-collar roots, Southern tradition, the roar of machines pushing past 200 miles per hour. It was the sport of the people, built on speed and honesty. Then came 23XI racing, and the narrative cracked. In late 2024, a legal and competitive storm began building around the team owned by NBA legend Michael Jordan and driver Denny Hamlin. Accusations of rule violations, whisper campaigns about preferential treatment, and a full antitrust lawsuit filed against NASCAR itself. The questions that followed were serious. How does a franchise backed by one of the most famous athletes on earth become the most polarizing force in American motorsport? Is this about cheating? About institutional power protecting itself? Or something more complicated? This touches something real in American life. It asks whether new entrants can truly challenge established systems. It asks who writes the rules and who those rules are written to protect. This is not just a sports story. This is a story about power, institutional control, and the uncomfortable truth that sometimes the rules were never designed to be fair to everyone playing. To understand today, you have to go back further than most headlines suggest. NASCAR was not built as an open marketplace. It was built as a controlled ecosystem, designed by the France family, who founded the sport in 1948 and ran it as a private enterprise with enormous authority over who competed and under what financial terms. That model worked for years. Teams accepted it. Sponsors funded it. Fans loved the product. Then in 2016, NASCAR introduced the charter system, a framework giving certain established teams guaranteed race entry and a share of revenue. It was marketed as a lifeline for struggling teams, and in some ways it was. But it also had a quiet side effect. It entrenched existing teams and made it significantly harder for new franchises to enter on equal footing. When 23XI Racing launched in 2021, it entered this system with celebrity backing and genuine ambition. But it quickly hit the structural ceiling that the charter model created. Negotiations for additional charters, the operating licenses defining a team's financial viability, became deeply contentious. What looked like a simple business expansion was, in reality, a collision between new money and old architecture. The heart of this conflict is about a business model and who controls it. NASCAR operates what economists would recognize as a closed-loop system. The sanctioning body sets the rules, controls the schedule, negotiates television contracts worth hundreds of millions annually, and determines how that money flows back to teams. In a traditional marketplace, this concentration of power would face immediate scrutiny. When 23XI Racing and Front Row Motorsports filed their antitrust lawsuit in late 2024, they made a specific allegation that NASCAR was using its dominant market position to suppress competition and control economic outcomes in ways that violated federal law. They argued the charter system functioned as a mechanism of control, locking teams into agreements that disproportionately benefited NASCAR. Simultaneously, technical scrutiny of 23XI's cars intensified. Inspection failures became part of the public narrative. Whether those violations were meaningful infractions or routine technical adjustments became fierce debate. The two storylines merged. The lawsuit made 23XI a target. The inspection issues gave critics ammunition. And suddenly a team that entered the sport with goodwill found itself at the center of a narrative it didn't fully control. When one powerful institution is challenged by a well-resourced outsider, the disruption rarely stays contained. It ripples outward, touching sponsors, broadcast partners, other teams, and the sport's long-term viability. Corporate sponsors need stability. When a federal antitrust lawsuit hangs over the sport's governing structure, they don't panic immediately, but they ask harder questions. They add contingency language to contracts. The financial ecosystem quietly becomes more fragile. Other charter holding teams found themselves in a difficult position too. Some privately supported 23XI's grievances, but maintained public neutrality, unwilling to risk their relationships with NASCAR. The sport, which had long projected unity, was visibly fractured. The clearest real-world example. In early 2025, NASCAR's new television deal with Amazon Prime Video and TNT Sports brought in significant new revenue. But the distribution formula for that revenue remained a central point of the legal dispute. Teams were competing on track while simultaneously fighting in federal court over whether competing was even economically sustainable. That is systemic dysfunction, and it does not resolve quickly. The phrase, cheating scandal, has attached itself to 23XI racing in ways that deserve honest examination. Mainstream sports media presented a clean narrative, a powerful team with celebrity ownership cutting corners, getting caught, facing consequences, easy to consume, and incomplete. Here is what that framing misses. Technical violations in NASCAR are common, not unique to one team. Every Cup Series team manages constant tension between maximizing performance and crossing boundaries that are, by design, extraordinarily precise. Cars are inspected before qualifying, before races, and after. The tolerances are measured in fractions of millimeters. When a car fails inspection, it carries real penalties. But calling it a cheating scandal requires context that surface reporting rarely provides. The deeper reality: 23XI's infractions became major news partly because of the antitrust lawsuit. The legal conflict created a lens through which every technical issue was viewed politically. Was NASCAR scrutinizing 23XI more carefully because of the lawsuit? The media narrative largely skipped that question. What audiences consumed was a simplified version. What it omitted was institutional complexity, the widespread nature of technical violations across the sport, and whether enforcement was being applied evenly or strategically. Project forward 5 to 10 years and several scenarios become visible. The most likely outcome is legal settlement. Antitrust litigation is expensive and damaging to all parties. NASCAR has strong incentives to settle on terms that remove the legal threat without fundamentally restructuring the charter system. 23XI secures improved terms. NASCAR retains its governance model. The sport moves forward with surface-level stability. This is historically the most common outcome in American sports antitrust cases. A second scenario involves a precedent-setting ruling. If 23XI wins on substantive antitrust grounds, the implications extend beyond racing, signaling that closed sports governance structures are legally vulnerable in ways previously assumed protected. That precedent could reshape how sports organizations structure team agreements across the entire industry. A third scenario is gradual fragmentation. If the conflict remains unresolved for years, competitive investment erodes slowly, sponsors grow cautious, broadcast ratings face additional headwinds from a sport perceived as institutionally dysfunctional. The honest projection: NASCAR will adapt, incrementally, reluctantly, but necessarily. Its commercial future depends on attracting exactly the kind of high-profile ownership that 23XI represents. That tension between institutional control and commercial necessity will define NASCAR's next decade. Why should someone outside racing care about this story? Because the 23XI controversy is a case study in a pattern that repeats across American life constantly. Established institutions create rules that serve their interests. New entrants arrive and find the rules weren't designed with them in mind. When they push back, the response involves regulatory pressure, public narrative management, and legal complexity. The details change, the structure repeats. For American households, the practical implications here are contained. This won't move energy prices or affect supply chains directly. But the principles at stake, how industries govern themselves, how antitrust law functions in practice, how corporate power interacts with competitive markets, these things do affect your life in other contexts. Watch the legal outcome of this case. If the antitrust lawsuit produces a meaningful ruling, it will be cited in future cases across industries. Watch whether other team owners, who privately share many of 23XI's grievances, begin to organize more formally. The indicators are specific. The lessons are transferable. If this kind of analytical depth is useful to you, consider subscribing. This channel exists to slow down complex stories and help you see the structure beneath the surface noise. Step back from one racing team and one lawsuit. What this story actually illustrates is how power operates in mature institutions, and how that operation only becomes visible when someone with enough resources decides to contest it openly. For most of NASCAR's history, governance tensions were managed quietly. Teams negotiated privately. The public saw competition on the track, not conflict in the boardroom. That carefully managed surface is exactly what most institutions present to the world. Clean, unified. Functioning. It takes a disruptor, someone willing to absorb reputational cost, to pull back the curtain. And when that happens, the reveal is almost always the same. The rules were written by the people who were already winning. That is not a conspiracy. It is simply how organizations evolve when accountability is limited and competition is controlled. In international motorsport, Formula One, global rally series, governance battles between teams and sanctioning bodies are constant. The mechanisms differ. The fundamental tensions do not. What you take from this story is a posture, not cynicism, but structural awareness, the habit of asking, whenever an institution presents a clean narrative, who benefits from that narrative being clean, and who bears the cost when it isn't. The race continues. The governance battle will too. Understanding both is how you watch more clearly.